On the Dallas Opera Network, you're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it is America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm George Cedarquist, joined this week by Weston Williams and our guest co-host, stage director Amy Hutchison. All right, this week we go inside the huddle with Amy to find out how she and her career survived when COVID hit Operaland. And then Amy and I go head-to-head in an epic 5-round TKO with two deep rosters of stage directors battling it out for best productions. Plus 2-minute drill. Uh-oh, the hammer, or is that the sickle, falls on another Russian soprano at the Met. Hey, look, if you're watching on TDO, make sure you subscribe to that podcast. Get the full show. Stitcher, Spotify, you're going to click follow. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, just hit the plus sign. It's that easy. And of course, send us a voice memo. Email us your hot takes on what we're talking about. Get your voice heard. operaboxscore@gmail.com. You're going to get OBS merch, beer coaster, lapel pin, just for sharing that hot take.
What a deal.
It's great merch, Weston. It's great to see you.
It's good to see you too, George. And I'm really glad to be hanging out with you instead of all of the little flies that have been around Chicagoland this week. Let me tell you, folks, if you don't live in Chicago, there is one day out of the year, if you're right next to the lake, where they come out and they mate. And it's the worst day of the entire year. You're spitting them out. It's a real mess. I'm in my bunker hiding from them as we speak. So it's good to talk some opera with you.
Amy Hutchison on the show with us as well. We're going to do a full intro in the moment. Amy, great to have you with us.
It's great to be here.
Have you been
flies
attacked by flies?
I have not been attacked by any flies, but maybe it's because I'm closer to the west side.
You're safe.
I'm not on the lake.
A little bit of sports talk before we get going. The WNBA champs, the Chicago Sky, our very own Sky, they're going to kick off their season this week, go for those back-to-back championships. They're also hosting the All-Star game this year as well. A lot.
It makes sense because the stars are in the sky.
No. Let's talk some opera.
Chalk Talk on Opera Box Score.
Stage director Amy Hutchison has championed American opera throughout her career and has served on the directing staffs of Lyric Opera of Chicago and Houston Grand Opera. Dedicated to artist training, Hutchison has been a faculty member at Northwestern University and Westminster Choir College, as well as directing and coaching the young artists of Lyric Opera's Ryan Artist Center and the Houston Opera Studio. She joins us from Chicago. Amy, again, so glad that you're with us on the show.
Thanks, George.
Let's get down to it. Okay. So the question, how did you have to pivot at the beginning of this pandemic in the field of opera?
Oh my gosh. It's just been such a devastating time for all of our friends and colleagues. And it's really been dreary and dismal. And it's thrilling to see opera and the performing arts in general really come bouncing back. The audiences are so hungry to just gather and be in a room experiencing live performance live performance together, and especially live music. So that's been really exciting. Pivoting, I had just one show that I was, lucky that I just had one show that vanished, which was, so I count myself super lucky there. And I'm lucky.
Did it completely vanish?
Totally vanished, completely obliterated, and will vanish forever. So because that by the time everything came back, other companies were doing it. So it was like other companies in Chicago were like, oh, we've announced we're doing this. So it's like, well, that won't be happening. Okay, great. By the time the board of directors kind of, got there, felt like, okay, we can do it again. It's like, oh, well, that's too late, folks, but that's okay.
It's definitely totally finders keepers rules in the cutthroat world of opera.
Absolutely. Especially in, the sort of storefront Chicago opera on the smaller scale. But, I really spent a lot of time supporting, donating a lot to opera companies, to friends, to, just to artists who were really suffering. So I did a lot of that. And then I also was really thrilled with how our industry was finally really talking to each other. in, directors forums where directors who are seldom even at a company together in the same city together, having time to actually converse about issues that are really important to our industry. That was actually really, really exciting. All of the dialogue that has happened that seems to me, and I think to everybody, to be making some really great changes in the industry, especially in terms of equity and inclusion.
Right.
In casting and especially in administrations. Some really, really exciting movement in that area across the board that I don't think would have necessarily happened so quickly without those wonderful dual forces. I shouldn't say wonderful, but the dual forces of Black Lives Matter and the pandemic. And literally, here we all have time and the opportunity to talk and be in dialogue with each other when we're not so busy, making and learning. So, yeah.
Obviously, as you said, a lot of the live operas coming back for the first time, which is really exhilarating. I'm not a director, of course, but as an audience member, I'm like, wow, it's so weird to be back in the same room sometimes. But we also, beyond, the social aspects and the social movements surrounding the pandemic, Black Lives Matter and things like that, we were also kind of wondering, because we've been asking this question a lot about the future of opera, not just in terms of its social implications, but as a medium. And one of the things we really saw was the growth of digital opera, video opera. We're wondering if you had any hot takes on that. Is that something you would see yourself doing, or what do you think the impact of that would be on the industry, not just for you, but in general?
It's thrilling. First of all, it's thrilling that large companies have fully embraced, what you're going to need to be, everybody now expects to be able to view something on demand from any place in the world. It's pretty much expected that if you're not live streaming it, that you're at least giving people digital access as an option, which I think is it's so great for our industry to be able to, first of all, and for directors to be able to have their work is now going to be captured, our ephemeral work that, it's too bad we don't have a good video of this. Now, companies, small, medium, and large, have embraced the fact that, well, you really need to have a good video. And if you're not even live streaming it, you need to capture it. So that's just thrilling from the perspective of being able to see so much more than you could normally see. I can see something from halfway across the world from the comfort of my own home, which, and it doesn't cost that much. Right. The Netflix for opera is, I think it's fantastic. And I think it's going to, in addition, all of the, the work of people who've been making original operatic works on film. One of the things that we were, I don't know if I can talk about this. Wait a minute. Hold on. I have been in conversations with the company about doing a film version, a production for film. Yeah. Or originally made for film, created for film. Of a show. And, it was really, really fascinating to sort of dissect what does it mean and how do we deal with our sound, opera, which is so, I'm going to do a visual now for opera, which is just, requires distance in some way to literally be able to cope with the epic sound that our incredible Olympian singers produce. Versus the medium of film is all about intimacy. It's the scale it's totally different. You experience it in such a different way. Film we're so accustomed to the close-up and this idea of that emotional intimacy that's just this, really tight connection. So that's the tricky thing, I think. But there's been really fantastic and wonderful things. And I think, directors have been embracing it, and companies and audiences are embracing it in a wonderful way. Exciting.
Is there something that you're working on right now, or something that you just finished that you're proud of?
Sure. I just finished doing As One, again at Opera Santa Barbara, with our friend Alexis Enyart, who is conducting her 6th production. It was, since we did it first for Chicago Fringe Opera. George, thank you very much for the opportunity to do that. I've had a really wonderful history with it, and it was the first time I've directed it. It was my 4th time directing it.
Wow!
But it was the first time that Alexis and I came back together.
Yes. Since
Since that very first one that we did, and oh my gosh, it was so rich and beautiful. 2 Chicago-based singers were our Hannahs, and we actually just gathered literally last night because they happened to be back in Chicago with Kostis Protopappas, who is the artistic and general director of Opera Santa Barbara. Ashley Armstrong was Hannah after, and Evan Bravos was Hannah before. Right. So it was absolutely wonderful and great to do that piece again.
Fantastic. That's awesome to have it come full circle like that.
Yeah.
Great to have you on the show again. We're going to get down to TKO in a second. Again, if you're watching on TDO, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You want the full show? Stitcher, Spotify, you click follow. Apple Podcasts, you just hit the plus sign. A little bit of sports before we get to the TKO. My father is a huge Formula One auto racing fan, and the locations of the Grand Prix change throughout every season. This year, there's 2 Grand Prix in the U.S. and the Miami Grand Prix, which I think is not on the streets of Miami, but it's somewhere in the area of Miami. Is this weekend. I think it's the first time they've ever had a Formula One Grand Prix in Miami. So if you're excited by people driving very fast
in a circle.
Well, Formula One is not in a circle. That's the beauty of Formula One. But
well, see, I'm from Alabama, so I only know NASCAR. If it's not in a circle, don't talk to me.
Right? Is it Talladega?
Oh yeah, Talladega. I drive past it. They got the flags. It's a very patriotic site for me as an Alabama native.
TKO, it's kicking off right now.
TKO on the OBS.
That's right. We're doing a TKO, but it's not a normal TKO. We're doing something a little bit different this time because usually we're pitting singers against each other, but we are in a very fun position tonight where we have 2 very talented directors and George Cedarquist. And we are here
and Amy Hutchison, dare I add.
And so we are here. What I've devised for you, I've put on my referee shirt, so I'm ready to go. What we have here is
in your referee shirt. That's excellent.
For the listeners to the podcast who aren't seeing the visual right now, I either look like a referee or the guy from Beetlejuice. Take your pick. So we are doing a lightning round. We're doing 5 operas. I picked 5 operas for you that I feel exemplify the areas in which a opera director has to excel. And you have both picked a pool of directors which you have to choose from. You can't choose the same one. And we're going to go through and you're going to try to convince me why in, I don't know, about a minute or less, why your director should be directing these operas. And at the end, maybe we'll announce the winner. Maybe we won't. I don't know. I'm just Beetlejuice. So we're going to start with the first opera pick, which in my mind is like the sort of gold standard in terms of something that if you are an opera director, you will probably be asked to do a lot, right? And that, of course, is La Bohème by Puccini. It's a deceptively difficult opera to direct. I'm going to start with Amy. Who is your pick to direct La Bohème?
I'm going way, way, way out a limb.
Okay.
Bohème. Mm-hmm. I don't know that anyone would choose this director to do Bohème, but I just thought, Bohème it's something, everybody's done it. I'm going to confess, I have in my entire career, I've never even assisted on Bohème. It's remarkable.
Wow, okay. That's amazing.
It's totally bizarre. It's totally bizarre. And perhaps that, I've done plenty of Puccini, but I've never done Bohème. So I thought, well, who would do something that was just so completely different than anyone could ever imagine? It's something, it's one of the, top operas that's always done. And I want to see what Robert Wilson would do.
That would be different.
Can't you just imagine it? Like a glacial white set that's just, it's almost in the middle of nowhere. And Parpignol is moving at a snail's pace throughout, just right around, and leaving perhaps a little trail of slime, a little snail trail, as he just slowly just goes across and around the set. Mimi comes in into just one single window up at the top with her candle.
The candle.
And to even think of what would he do with the cafe? I mean, I just picture one single table just emerging up from the trap, slowly, epically through the entire act, and then everyone again. It's going to take a little while, but eventually, Musetta's going to just have a blast and finally get on that table.
I think that's great. Amy, you're really speaking my language with this production. But we have to turn to George now. George, who are you going to put up against Robert Wilson?
First and foremost, let me say that now that we finally got rid of Oliver and Matt, we can actually talk about directors and people that matter. My pick for La Boheme is Richard Jones, who probably has done Boheme at some point. Of course, you might know his production of Hansel and Gretel, which has done the rounds. He's doing the Ring Cycle at ENO this season. He did Ariodante at Lyric last year. Richard Jones's production of La Boheme would be a laugh riot. It would be the funniest production of Boheme you'd ever seen. The man's sense of humor is so dark. He would find the humor, not just in Act 1, which is genuinely amusing, but by the time you get to Act 3 and Act 4, or Act 2 and Act 1, if it's the Yuval Sharon production at Detroit Opera.
Right.
It would be just a laugh riot, and that's why people would want to see it.
All right, it's come to me to make a decision, and if you know me, you know that I love Philip Glass, and because I love Philip Glass, for this production of Puccini's La Boheme, I'm going to have to give it to Amy for this round. But that's okay, George. You're about to get another chance.
Just for sheer audacity.
Just for the sheer audacity. However, you might have played that trump card too early, because now we have to go to what I think is another interesting challenge that directors face. And for me, that is the Baroque repertoire, because the conventions of like high Baroque, of course, if you want to do something historically informed, is very complicated, very specific. So a lot of people tend to go the other way and really like embrace the freedom of audiences, not necessarily knowing what it was supposed to look like and really going off in another direction with it, which is what I really like about a lot of Baroque productions. So, George, I'm going to give you the challenge of finding a director for Giulio Cesare, one of the 5 operas you know by Handel.
Yes. I only know 4 operas by Handel. But Giulio Cesare is one of them. It's such a great piece. My pick, looking at my roster of directors, would be Katie Mitchell. Katie Mitchell, British director, has done a lot of theater, actually, a lot of Chekhov, and perhaps more recently, a lot of oratorio, and is kind of a whiz at putting on large-scale interpretations and points of view of oratorio, which can be really tricky to do. If you're working with Handel, da capo aria, the story does not move fast. You need someone who can come in hot with a really great point of view. And I think Katie Mitchell would do exactly that. This is just the sort of repertoire that she likes to work with. And she's just the sort of person to bring in a unique point of view that can carry you through the 3+ hours of this opera.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's actually a really good pitch. I'm imagining it now. So it's up to you, Amy, to see if you can beat that pitch from George.
Well, I'm dying to see some Katie Mitchell work, like right now. My pick is Thaddeus Strasburger, because I think, like Thad, I just want you to just think about Thad's work is always like, this man takes epic. Like you can't even, his work, first of all, he does work on a scale, massive outdoor works. His Turandot, it like literally, it's like carved into the side of a mountain, and it has, fighters rappelling down the side of a mountain, and people coming in by boat, and and people twirling fire. Absolutely incredible. So I think with his Cesare, again, the decadence, I think what Thad would do, it would be, really visually splendid. Thinking about Thad taking Egypt and taking Cleopatra on, like, that's exciting. He has, a big history with Rome. He had a beautiful, really gorgeous La Clemenza di Tito in LA with gorgeous costumes by Maddie Ulrich, like gorgeous costumes by Maddie. And I think that his work is so painterly that I think he would really, just milk it for all the spectacle and fabulousness that I think is inherent in the piece, and really just make it come. It would be surprise after surprise after surprise. He uses the elements, fire, water, all that. And I think that could really come into a beautiful.
Great for Baroque too. Yeah.
Really, really nice for that. Yeah. Always full of surprises.
Oh man, this is actually I really want to see both of these productions. I think I'm going to go with Amy again. I think I want to see Thaddeus's production. That's two. That is two for Amy, none for George yet. Let's see if we can really turn it around, because I feel like we've been talking a lot about spectacle, right? Even like the Robert Wilson, very big sort of abstract. I kind of want to take us a little bit in the other direction, unless you guys have a pitch for me that will blow me away. Because for me, when I think about Mozart operas, I think very much about the human drama, the very specific, almost conversational kind of drama that happens, especially in what I think is the most Mozarty of Mozart operas, The Marriage of Figaro. Yes. That one, I think, is such a almost understated piece in a lot of ways, but I think it's one that really a director can really show off how they can move their singers and their actors in a way that really speaks to the audience. So I think let's go ahead and start with Amy, since you've just been winning all of them. Let's give you another try here. Okay. Amy, who is your pick for Marriage of Figaro?
For Marriage of Figaro, I pick Robert Carson. I would love to see Robert's Marriage of Figaro. I have to say, were you saying, George is worrying? Oh, yeah, George. Worried. I'm, 3 strikes and you're out, George. Isn't that a sports thing?
It is.
But Robert Carson, his work is always so sophisticated and just conceived, from the beginning through the end. It's conceptually just so pristine. But also Robert's work, he always has really a meticulous attention to detail of the libretto. And I think the libretto, De Ponte's libretto to Notte di Figaro, is so fine and just, replete with, nuanced, wonderful human characters. Their foibles, who they are, but there's comedy, and Robert can also do comedy. You don't think of it like outright, but he definitely can. He's really a man of the theater, and he's also very actorly, in addition to having this fineness of scale. And then also, of course, in a Robert Carson production, it would be, there would be, 3 walls where we're in this little universe for the entire time, and then by the, just imagine what will it be when the Countess forgives the Count? This glorious, one of the most glorious moments in all of opera. Then, the walls will lift. Coriam tutti, coriam tutti, coriam tutti. Of course, the whole set would just lift and rise up to the sky.
Yeah.
Beautiful, wonderful celebration.
Wow.
All right, George, you're going to have to make a comeback. Amy's in the lead.
Looking good. Amy, I think you assisted Robert Carson, didn't you? Or on one of those revivals? Yeah. I've
actually done 3 Robert Carson shows.
Man.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is not looking good for me. I will say, I love this choice of repertoire, though. For this TKO. Fun fact, since Marriage of Figaro premiered at the Burgtheater in Vienna in 1786, I think there's literally been a production of it every day.
Wow.
That's probably true.
This little opera stat for you. Okay, so here's the thing. Robert Carson, text analysis, very close to the text. The Da Ponte libretto of Figaro, absolutely. Pristine, not how I would describe the Marriage of Figaro.
Okay, great.
Okay.
That's fair. That's fair.
Here's my choice.
It's true.
Spanish director, Catalan director, Calixto Bieto. The bad boy of European opera, the person that people hate to love and love to hate. He's doing, next episode we'll be talking about his work in Vienna next year. Here's what you're going to get. First of all, the entire chorus will be naked.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Probably.
And there will probably be sex acts in the show that I can't say on a family podcast.
Are they Italian words, George?
But what you're going to get is you're going to get attitude. You're going to get response. You're going to be pushed, and you're going to love it or you're going to hate it. But you are going to feel, and you're going to feel deeply. And I don't think you can be more Mozart than that.
That's a good pitch.
I love that.
I think I will say, I think Robert Carson is an excellent director, and I would love to see this production. But I do think that the production, Amy, that you described can be done by other directors in a way that perhaps George's selection could not, legally in some places. So maybe this might be a pity point at this point because you are behind George, but I think I will give George this round. So right now we've got 2 Amy, 1 George. Let's see if we can tie it up in this next round. And I think this is actually a pretty good round potentially for you to take it, George, because we're talking about Benjamin Britten. I really wanted to make sure we included a chamber opera on this list. And of course, I think that in my mind, the quintessential piece in that sort of genre is Turn of the Screw. It's got all the drama, all the complicated vocal lines. It's got there's something about it that's really not like any other opera that I think is currently done on a regular basis. I love it. And I think George, as the resident Britten expert on the panel, I think you might have a really interesting pick for us. So hit me with it.
Well, so I'm running into problems already because on my roster, I've kind of painted myself into a corner. I've got 2 people left on the roster with 1 person on the bench, which I might have to use. Here's my choice for Turn of the Screw. It's hometown hero Mary Zimmerman. Professor of performance studies at Northwestern University, directed as a resident director at the Goodman Theater here in Chicago. Here's what Mary Zimmerman does well is, first of all, period pieces very well. I've been Mary's personal assistant on a show, and she did the Lucia at the Met in the early aughts. Such a great sense of period and how to bring that period to life. Works with great designers, but a great understanding of the people of that period. And Turn of the Screw is nothing if not a period piece, of course, based on the short story by Henry James. Almost forgot that.
Do not say Edgar Allan Poe. Tempting, but wrong.
The other thing that Mary does so well is she is able to be ambiguous without being vague. Vague is like, I don't know what's going on here. Ambiguous is like, I think this is happening. No, I think this is happening. And Turn of the Screw, the bad productions of Turn of the Screw are vague, and the good productions of Turn of the Screw are ambiguous. Lastly, what I would say about Turn of the Screw, and this is to Mary's credit, typically in the work that I've seen of hers, where it comes to sex, is that it is very conceptual. It is a lot of sheets being flapped in the wind and a lot of objects.
like a ghost, if you will.
The point is, Turn of the Screw, as a piece that revolves around sex, but the late Victorian sex, I think she would actually handle it in a very specific and surprising way. She's my choice.
Okay, very, very strong pitch. I love the vague and ambiguous distinction. That's great. All right, Amy, what do you have for me for Turn of the Screw?
Okay, I would love to see Mary Zimmerman's Turn of the Screw.
Wouldn't you, though?
I mean, I think that's a fantastic choice. And I too have painted myself into kind of a ridiculous corner here. My other choices, first of all, one of my hometown hero choices has already done a production of Turn of the Screw, George Cedarquist, that was actually really exciting and new and fresh and scary and actually scary, which was terrific. But I have to say, my other two directors are on my roster. I'm going to pivot away from them because they're just...
you're calling an audible. Oh, wow. She's going off script. Okay.
I've got to go off script. Yeah. And I'm just going to say Francesca Zambello. I would love to see. Let's let these two women titans of American theater and opera. Let's let them duke it out. Cheska has such a great sense of also definitely of history, but there's something in Britain. I actually don't know. Well, I mean, obviously Cheska's done Billy Budd, but there's not a ton of opportunity for, shirtless bodybuilders in Turn of the Screw. Maybe a little bit, but that sense of really sort of passion that feels to me like is really an undercurrent in Turn of the Screw. It can be musically, it can be sort of ethereal, and the spookiness, but I think Cheska could really dig into, the sort of terror, the passion, and also, you think about Mrs. Gross, it makes me think about Rebecca. Cheska, of course, directed, and I also can't pick Cheska for Ring Cycle because she's already done one. But again, I could just see something that's so haunting and so scary, but really is almost sort of boiling versus this sort of slow simmer, but that's just really sort of boiling and bubbling over. And that is really just sort of makes you almost sort of shake with terror about what can happen next. Yeah.
I think that's a really good pitch. Unfortunately, because you did go off the bench, I am wearing the referee shirt. I have to put a flag in the play. And unfortunately, that means we give it to George for this round, which means would you look at that? How coincidental and unplanned of me. We have a tie going into the final round. Who will win? And you mentioned it earlier, Amy, but I'm going to say the final pick for me is probably the most daunting task for any director of opera. And that is, of course, Wagner's Ring Cycle. You talk about scale, you talk about commitment, you talk about cast size, difficulties dealing with the orchestra. It is a monumental task for any one or even several directors to have to handle, even if you're doing multiple directors in the same production of Rheingold. So I want you.
Don't get me started on that.
So I want you both to pick me one more director who you think can take on the Ring. Let's start with our guest, Amy Hutchison.
So this is a really unconventional choice for a million reasons. The first of which is that he's dead.
That could be a bit of an issue.
I'm going to have, Weston, even though
we did Turn of the Screw last time. So,
well, this is another director that I assisted that I think there's something about the Ring Cycle that is, there are so many layers of story that are happening. And, it's so thrilling when the Ring heads have descended upon your city to see a full cycle. And of course, Chicago was absolutely robbed of its cycle by the pandemic. Yeah. I don't know that there's a sadder, loss in terms of opera. Excusing, of course, our colleagues who passed away, but all of the years and years of planning, and then to have Lyric have its Ring Cycle, absolutely ripped at the dress rehearsal. Sorry, everyone, can't go on. This show literally can't go on, and I'm assuming it never will. I don't know how. I don't think it could. I don't know. I just don't think it could. I don't have an insider track on that, but I just don't see how it ever could. In any way, here's my pitch for the zombie director to to like, what in the world would he do with the ring cycle? I'm going to pick Robert Altman.
Oh.
Here is why. Bob Altman, first of all, I think that, a lot of directors have been able to sort of find humor within the ring. And that's always really appreciated because it's not something that you think of, but it is very human. It is, though it's about all the gods and goddesses, there are jokes for sure.
I would argue it's funnier than Meistersinger.
Meistersinger. But Bob just has this, this take on human nature that is, he really doesn't take people all that seriously. And he really, the other aspect to Bob's work, always in everything, in his films and in his operas, he loved to have so much going on in the stage picture at all times. And I think of, oftentimes in ring production, in the different productions of the ring, you're really focused on, okay, well, here are the Rhine maidens, here's Alberich, here's the dragon, all of that. That you're really focused on, here is exactly what's happening in this moment in the opera, and not so much on all of the layers of backstory, all of the other characters in this epic tale, and what could be going on in their storylines that could reveal something about this moment that's happening right now, playing in front of us. Bob's work was, he's always said, I want that stage to look like a Dutch ice skating painting, where there's just so much happening throughout the stage picture that it's all overlapping and it's all happening at all times. And I think that could be really exciting with a ring cycle because of all of the characters and all of the fact that, sometimes we're on the earth, sometimes we're at Valhalla, sometimes we're in this, in the ride. I think it could be really, really fun to have, especially for people who really know all the characters and know all the stories and, know it from beginning to end, and to really reveal, all of that, I think could be super fun.
Amy really coming in with Team Bob over here. If you're keeping track, I believe that's
Zombie
3
Bob.
Roberts. So George, we have what it takes to beat the Bob and beat Amy. This is your final chance. Who is your pick to direct the ring cycle?
Yeah, don't call it a comeback, Hutchison. You were 2 up and you thought I was dead, didn't you? Here we go. So it is the ring cycle. It is the Super Bowl of opera, definitely. Except that the Super Bowl is longer than the ring cycle. So I really painted myself into a corner again because the last person on my list has already been used, which was Robert Wilson. So I'm going to have to go to the bench to the 6th man in basketball terms. And of course, this is a man, actually, Graham Vick. Vick died of COVID I think late in 2020. Here's the thing. Graham Vick founded the Birmingham Opera Company, Birmingham, England, which was one of the most effective, passionate, community-driven opera companies that I have ever come across. Of course, Graham Vick's productions are still being done. They're still part of the repertoire.
Right.
But if you wanted a production of the ring cycle that wasn't gods and monsters, but that was family, community, and relationships, about real people that actually involved the people that were in that community, that were producing it, that were watching it, that were building it, the sense of discovery on stage and off, there is no one better than Graham Vick to do that. So if that is your production of Ring Cycle, he is your guy.
All right. 2 very, very strong final picks. 2 very interesting final picks too, I would add.
Both. Coming back to earth,
That's
back
true.
to
I didn't think of that. Yeah.
I think it's kind of funny because I feel like you both picked very kind of opposite for each of them, but this one really has like a certain like unity to it. I'm like I really see both of those in the same kind of way. And in the spirit of that, in the spirit of not tearing apart the Chicago opera directing community, I am going to declare it a tie. Congratulations to you both for our inaugural director lightning rounds.
We didn't have to invoke, the great Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, and float like Madama Butterfly and sting like Cozy. George's mouth can't beat what George's hands can't see. I don't know.
On second thought, just because of that, I'm giving it to Amy. All right, Amy wins. All right, let's move on.
That quote was phenomenal. I'm putting that on a t-shirt. Amy Hutchison takes it away with TKO, 2-minute drill. That's right now.
This just in, the 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
It's a major award. The Met has announced the 2022 winners of the L'Enfant competition. Congratulations to Lee Bu, Matthew Cairns, Alexander Rozakov, Julie Rosette, Anne-Marie Stanley, and Esther Toney.
It's the Major Internet Award. San Francisco Opera and Luma High Productions received the 2022 Webby People's Voice Award for Best Music Video Series and Channel for its series In Song. The award's lauded by the New York Times as, quote, the internet's highest honor.
I thought that was just what happens when your post gets 20 likes on Facebook. But, apparently we are in different circles, me and the New York Times. The Met has announced that Russian soprano Hybla Gertsmava, a Putin enthusiast, has been dropped from next season's production of Puccini's Tosca. Her replacement will be Ukrainian Ludmila Monastyrska, who replaced Anna Netrebko as Turandot. Monastyrska recently made headlines for wrapping herself in a Ukrainian flag during a curtain call in that same Turandot production.
The Met and Polish National Opera have joined forces to create the Ukrainian Freedom Orchestra, comprised of refugees and Ukrainian members of European orchestras. Quote, I wanted to bring the best orchestral musicians of Ukraine together from both inside and outside of their countries in a proud display of artistic unity, said friend of the show, Carrie Lynn Wilson, who will be directing and conducting the ensemble.
Bogdan Rosic, general director of the Vienna State Opera, announced in a press conference last week that Anna Netrebko would not be banned from performing at the Staatsoper. Rosic conceded that artists that are publicly for the war would not be getting contracts at state theaters, but said, quote, it's not up to us to ask people to speak out, adding that, quote, again, I personally do not believe that Ms. Netrebko should be banned from working in the country of which she is a citizen.
Pittsburgh Opera and the National Opera House have announced a new partnership involving music education programming, artistic development, and community engagement. The National Opera House, originally known as the National Negro Opera Company, was the site of one of the first black opera companies in the U.S. Quote, this coming together of our two organizations is monumental, said National Opera House President Jeanette Solomon. The time for reconciliation is never too late.
In trade news, Glyndebourne has announced that Richard Davidson Houston will be the festival's new managing director. He's taking over from Sarah Hopwood, who is set to retire from the position after 25 years with the company.
Exit stage right Australian countertenor Max Riebel, who's died at age 30. Riebel was just starting an international career in addition to a thriving cabaret tour that combined pop and classical music. A statement from Pinchgut Opera said, quote, Max will be counted among the great countertenors. At the forefront of his musical personality was an unwavering dedication to beauty, clarity, and warmth of tone.
Plato Karianis, a former general director of the Dallas Opera, has died. TDO wrote, quote, he served the company faithfully from 1977 to 2000, and his impact will be forever felt within the Dallas Opera family. Throughout his entire life, Plato was an innovator in the arts, and we are honored to have benefited from this relationship for more than 20 years. His memory lives on in the Karianis Rehearsal Production Center, as well as an impressive legacy of artistic achievements.
And on this day, May 2nd, in 1660, was the birth of Italian composer Alessandro Scarlatti in Palermo. 1692, first performance of Henry Purcell's opera The Fairy Queen in London. In 1754, the birth of Spanish composer Vicente Martín y Soler in Valencia. 1854, the first performance of Offenbach's Le Mariage aux Lanternes in Paris. 1855, next year, the first production of Verdi's Trovatore in the U.S. That was at the Academy of Music in New York City. 1955, the American debut of baritone Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau in a song recital in New York City's Town Hall. And in 2022, George got to do On This Day for the first time ever.
Really? Is that the first time? Oh, congratulations, everybody. That's your 2-minute drill.
Oh, solitude, my sweetest choice. Oh, solitude, oh, solitude, my sweetest choice.
Max Riebel singing "O Solitude" by Henry Purcell.
Yeah, a very tragic death from cancer. He announced just a few days before it happened on Facebook that he had been diagnosed with incurable cancer, and it was just really tragic to lose anyone at that age, but certainly someone with such promise and just really getting started on the international stage.
Finch got a phenomenal opera company in Australia. Max had first performed there in 2019, so just a few years under his belt. Of course, probably some of those performances sacrificed to COVID as well. Before I forget, make sure you send us a voice memo. Email us your own hot takes on what we're talking about in the 2-minute drill. operaboxscore@gmail.com. You're going to want to get that OBS merch. And the Met drops another singer like a hot rock. Ooh.
Yes, it's very interesting to see. Obviously, we've been seeing this happening all over the place. Obviously, pro-Putin singers being dropped left and right, and in the case of some, even more ambiguously pro-Putin getting dropped as well. I mean, at this point, it's kind of what's expected, and it will probably continue to happen for a while to come. But I do think that leads us in a little bit to the latest Anna Netrebko drama, which, of course, we don't want to give too much airtime to because she is the drama. And I think it's very interesting that it feels like Rosic is really positioning himself counter to the Metropolitan Opera specifically, right? Because the Met has very much been... prior to the whole war, Netrebko was very much the golden child of the company. And now, even though she has publicly expressed disapproval of the war, there is sufficient evidence, at least in the public perception, that she is maybe a little bit less than honest about her past involvement with Putin and the regime. So it's very interesting to see the difference between companies and how they are treating Anna specifically. Anna
Netrebko is about as Austrian as I am, which is to say, once she ate a Wiener Schnitzel. Okay, so Rosic says, I personally do not believe that Ms. Netrebko should be banned from working in the country of which she is a citizen. It's not about citizenship. It's about coming down on the side of right. And the tragedy is that someone as prominent as her could actually use that prominence for good.
Yeah, it's true.
And could actually, come out and really, I think, have an impact. If you have people in the performing arts in the public eye who really, come out and say what's on their mind and speak truth, then you have the power. With great power comes great responsibility. You have the power to really try and change the narrative.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that's easy.
Yeah. What's also not easy is apparently hiring someone for Glyndebourne who doesn't have a double name.
Yes, I think it's part of the job description is that you have to have a double-barreled surname in order to run a place like Glyndebourne. How Sarah Hopwood lasted 25 years, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
Richard Davidson Houston, or is that Houston?
It might be Houston. Houston sounded very Texan when I said it, but I'm not sure.
I'm sure he's going to be just fine.
Yeah. I think there's also a lot of I think there's a lot of a really interesting sort of shifts going on in right now. I feel like a lot of companies coming out of the pandemic, they've had like their first season sort of outside it. I feel like we've seen a lot of turnover recently as like the old guard is like, okay, we finally have done one last project. it's time to like try to pass on to the next generation. And we're seeing that reflected in a lot of diversity as well. Maybe not so much with Mr. Houston here. But I do think, and this could just be a consequence of how we are doing the show now, but I feel like we're seeing a lot more turnover in artistic directors and stuff ever since this time 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's because they're all exhausted and tired.
It's true. I mean, yeah.
They're throwing their hands up like let this be someone else's problem. I got us through this, and it's still insecure. It's still not entirely clear where we go from here.
Before we wrap it up, I feel like I've actually heard of the Webby People's Voice Awards.
It sounds made up.
It's not made up, man. It's real. It's real.
The New York Times called it, what is it? The internet's highest honor? Like, I don't know. It just seems like, no, this is not to disparage the achievement. I think they definitely deserve the award. It's just very funny to me whenever I come across an award, yet another award that I've never heard of, that I've never heard anyone ever talk about before. And the New York Times just calls it the highest honor on the internet. And I'm like, there might be a difference between the print media and the internet media in this case. I could be wrong. I apologize to the New York Times if I am, but I don't know. I could fight the New York Times. It's fine. It's a piece of paper.
I said we were going to wrap it up. One more story I want to get to and get Amy
please
your take
do.
on this. This is the Pittsburgh Opera National Opera House partnership.
Fabulous.
It's really fabulous. This has been in the Opera America magazine a couple of times right now. The building itself in the Hill District in Pittsburgh, right? So the Hill District, this is the stomping ground of playwright August Wilson. This is a very, very important building. And just imagine the potential of this pairing.
It's really thrilling. And I think, tying that history and saying, this is at this moment that we're experiencing in our industry it's just, I'm ecstatic. I'm personally really ecstatic to have, Black artists, featured, that we're telling stories about African-American stories and people and myriad stories, Black joy, Black love, in addition to, pain and oppression and everything, that people have gone through. It's an exciting time.
And it also really I think the really cool thing about this pairing for me too is like bringing in the history of it too, because I feel like there's a misconception out there in the general public who think of Black opera as being a very new phenomenon. We're just now doing it. It went all the way back. This is one of the first opera companies, 1942. I believe there were some that actually predated that Harry Lawrence Freeman was associated with. Of course, Scott Joplin wrote an opera in the 1800s even. There's this long, long legacy of Black singers, Black composers. Exactly. And the people involved, in the original National Negro Opera Company too. We've got Robert McFerrin, Bobby McFerrin's dad. He's always fun. Lillian Avanti, Minto Cato. It's really kind of there's this whole legacy there that's been neglected and deserves to not just be like it. Black opera is not a new thing. We need to acknowledge that it's always been there. It's always been unfairly moved to the side where you're doing little productions in a house somewhere because Pittsburgh Opera won't have you. But now they can be there. Yeah. I think it's really valuable. I think it's really exciting. I'm very excited about this partnership.
Lastly, of course, the National Opera House is a place historically of Black excellence. And that's the last thing that I think is important that we really lift up, right? Is spaces that are full of Black excellence. This is the building that Denise Graves is, as of last year, was campaigning to try.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Let us wrap our show up.
Good call. Bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call is how we always take you home wherever you are, however you're listening. Something really great that our panel has seen or heard or watched, or something pretty dreadful with our guest co-hosts. We're going to kick it off. Amy Hutchison.
Well, I want to say a good call is a future good call. I hope that people will be paying attention to the fact that Detroit, speaking of Black opera, that Detroit Opera, which is the rebranded, sort of corrected name of
Rightly so.
formerly Michigan Opera Theater, it's now Detroit Opera, which is wonderful, is producing Anthony Davis's X, The Life and Times of Malcolm X, and I could not be more thrilled. I'm going to try and get my butt to Detroit May 14th, 19th, and 22nd. So hop on a train, get a road trip, do what you need to do. It is going to be the place to be. It's
Take
a
us with
beautiful
you.
opera house. I was there. I did the Traviata that opened the opera house. It's a fabulous hall to experience opera in. And I mean, this cast, Devon Tynes is Malcolm, Whitney Morrison, who just actually had yet another just incredible triumph in Fire Shut Up in My Bones, as even going on as the second, well, she wasn't even originally second cast, she was the understudy in that, and just, woo, awesome. Anyway, it's really going to be thrilling, and I'm going to be there for it.
Weston Williams.
My good call this week, I have been listening to a new recording. This is the Renee Jacobs with the Freiburg Baroque Orchestra doing Der Freischütz. Now, this is not your dad's Freischütz. This is a radio play version where they have redone some of the dialogue to modernize it. I don't speak enough German to know how modern it is. But they've also, because obviously if you remember, there's a prologue at the beginning to explain some things, because originally that was going to be part of the opera. It got cut. Weber regretted it, and he added in the spoken dialogue. So what Jacobs has done is take music from other Weber projects, and I think a little bit of Schubert, and put those to text and filled in some of those holes in the opera. And when you talk about sound effects and like top notch, like completely hammy in the best possible way, speaking for the speaking parts, especially in the Wolf's Glen scene, it is a delight. It is so much fun to hear. It's a refreshing sort of new take that on the opera that really sort of preserve. It's just like that.
A radio play.
Stealing it. We're going to get a copyright claim on that because of that. But no, this is a great little radio production, as it were. And it's a studio recording too, which is pretty rare for operas nowadays. So highly recommend you check that out. It's a lot of fun.
My sixth grader is in the middle school musical, which is Into the Woods Junior, which is fantastic. Please, Mrs. Worthington, don't put your daughter on the stage, as Noel Howard said. But enough about him.
We can't keep him off the stage.
It got me thinking, I would love to see a Ring Cycle Junior.
Oh, that's a great idea. George.
Directed by...
By Amy Hutchison, of course.
Perfect.
That's it for this week's
children's
edition
opera
of America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Our announcer, it's Norm Waddell. He's at normwaddell.com. Again, if you're watching on TDO, you make sure you subscribe to the podcast, get the full show. Stitcher and Spotify, you click follow. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, just hit the plus sign. Send us a voice memo. Email us your hot takes, operaboxscore@gmail.com. You're going to get an OBS beer coaster and an OBS lapel pin just for sharing your own hot take. Our creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. Our audio and video editor is Weston Williams. For our guest co-host, Amy Hutchison, I'm George Cedarquist, asking you to continue the conversation about operas. You try and stage Act 2 of La Boheme with an 80-person chorus in a single 3-hour rehearsal. We're back with an all-new show next week when we highlight the key players in America's summer opera season this year. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more notes from that dress rehearsal. Join us.